haunting Europe, the specter of communism is entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter. Pope and Tsar, all the powers of old Europe have, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German stormtrooper spies. The party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power, where is not hurled back the branding reproach of communism, where the opposition that has opposition parties against the more advanced, as well as against its reactionary adversaries. Two things result from this fact. I, already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power, communism is. 2. High time that communists should openly, it is, in the face of the whole world, their views, publish, their aims, their tendencies, this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself, and meet. To this end, communists of various nationalities have assembled in London, and sketched the following manifesto, to be published in the English, French, German, Italian, Flemish and Danish languages. The history of class struggles, bourgeois and proletarians. The history of all hitherto existing societies is freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guild master and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, in constant opposition to one another, stood on an uninterrupted, carried, now hidden, now open fight, a fight that each time ended, either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large, or in the common ruin of the contending classes. In the earlier epochs of history, almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, we find a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome we have patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guild masters, journeymen, apprentices, serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate gradations, sprouted from the ruins of feudal society, has not done away with class antagonisms. The modern bourgeois society that has, it has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of the old ones. Our epoch, the epoch of the bourgeoisie, possesses, however, simplified the class antagonisms. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps. This distinctive feature, it has, into two great classes, directly facing each other, bourgeoisie and proletariat. Sprang the chartered burghers of the earliest towns, from the serfs of the Middle Ages. Developed from these burgesses the first elements of the bourgeoisie were the discovery of America, the rounding of the Cape, up fresh ground for the rising bourgeoisie, opened the East Indian and Chinese markets, the colonization of America, trade with the colonies, of exchange and in commodities generally, the increase in the means to commerce gave to navigation, to industry, an impulse never before known, and thereby, to the revolutionary element in the tottering feudal society, a rapid development. The feudal system of industry, guilds, under which industrial production was monopolized by closed, for the growing wants of the new markets, now no longer sufficed. The manufacturing system took its place, pushed on one side by the manufacturing middle class. Division of labor between the different corporate guilds vanished in the face of division of labor in each single workshop. The guild masters were ever growing, meantime the markets kept, the demand ever rising. No longer sufficed, even manufacture. Thereupon, steam and machinery revolutionized industrial production. Taken by the giant, the place of manufacture was modern industry, the place of the industrial middle class, by industrial millionaires, the leaders of whole industrial armies, the modern bourgeois. Established the world market, modern industry has, for which the discovery of America paved the way, given an immense development to commerce. This market has, to navigation, to communication by land. This development has, in its time, on the extension of industry, and in proportion as industry reacted commerce, navigation, railways extended. In the same proportion the bourgeoisie developed, increased its capital, into the background every class handed down from the Middle Ages, and pushed. We see, therefore, itself the product of a long course of development, how the modern bourgeoisie is, of a series of revolutions in the modes of production and of exchange, accompanied by a corresponding political advance of that class. Each step in the development of the bourgeoisie was an oppressed class under the sway of the feudal nobility, an armed and self-governing association in the medieval commune. Here independent urban republic, as in Italy and Germany, their taxable third estate of the monarchy as in France, afterwards, proper, in the period of manufacture, serving either the semi-feudal or the absolute monarchy as a counterpoise against the nobility, and, in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general. At last, the bourgeoisie has, since the establishment of modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself, in the modern representative state, exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie, historically, played a most revolutionary part. Has the bourgeoisie got the upper hand, wherever it has put an end to all feudal, has patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his natural superiors, left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, and has, than callous cash payment, drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor. It has, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism, in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless and feasible chartered freedoms, set up that single, has, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. Stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honored and looked up to with reverent awe, the bourgeoisie has. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science, into its paid-wage laborers. Torn away from the family its sentimental veil, the bourgeoisie has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation, and has disclosed how it came to pass that the brutal display of vigor in the Middle Ages, the bourgeoisie has, which reactionists so much admire, its fitting complement in the most slothful indolence, found, been the first to show what man's activity can bring about. It has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids. It has Roman aqueducts, in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put, without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production, the bourgeoisie cannot exist, and thereby the relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. Conservation of the old modes of production in unaltered form was, on the contrary, the first condition of existence for all earlier industrial classes. Constant revolutionizing of production, uninterrupted disturbance of all social conditions, the bourgeois epoch from all earlier ones, everlasting uncertainty and agitation distinguish all fixed, fast-frozen relations, with their train of ancient and venerable prejudices and opinions, swept away, are antiquated before they can ossify, unformed once become. Solid melts into air, all that is holy is profaned, all that is, at last compelled to face with sober senses, and man is, his real conditions of life, and his relations with his kind. The need of a constantly expanding market for its product chases the bourgeoisie over the whole surface of the globe. It must nestle everywhere, settle, connections everywhere, establish. Through its exploitation of the world market given a cosmopolitan character to production and consumption in every country, the bourgeoisie has, to the great chagrin of reactionists, it has drawn from under the feet of industry the national ground on which it stood. daily being destroyed. All old established national industries have been destroyed or are dislodged by new industries. They are a life and death question for all civilized nations, whose introduction becomes by industries that no longer work up indigenous raw material consumed, but raw material drawn from the remotest zones. Industries whose products are not only at home, but in every quarter of the globe. In place of the old wants, satisfied by the productions of the country, new wants, we find, requiring for their satisfaction, the products of distant lands and climes. In place of the old local and national seclusion and self-sufficiency, intercourse in every direction, we have universal interdependence of nations. And as in material, so also in intellectual production. Common property, the intellectual creations of individual nations become more and more impossible. National one-sidedness and narrow-mindedness become, and from the numerous national and local literatures, a world literature, there arises the bourgeoisie, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, of communication, by the immensely facilitated means, all draws, even the most barbarian, nations into civilization. The heavy artillery with which it batters down all Chinese walls, the cheap prices of its commodities are, with which it forces the barbarians' intensely obstinate hatred of foreigners to capitulate. All nations, it compels, on pain of extinction, them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst, to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels, that is, to become bourgeois themselves. In one word, a world after its own image, it creates. Subjected the country to the rule of the towns, the bourgeoisie has created enormous cities. It has greatly increased the urban population. Strong. The force is with this one. Almost as strong as the force I used to thrust into your mom last night.